Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining in today. Just going to give everyone a few minutes. And I think we'll go ahead and get started here. Pretty interesting presentation, I hope, for you all today. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Technology Tuesdays. My name is Lydia Nimke, and this week I'm excited to bring you our presentation on digital media literacy. I will let you all know that you are muted and have your cameras turned off by default, but don't let that stop you from asking questions through the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Today, the wonderful Beth is actually out on leave, so I'm running this one solo, but she'll be back with us next week. So please have patience with me as I try and make sure I read what you put in the chat and pay attention to Q&A. Yeah, let's get into the major concepts we're going to be covering today. First of all, we're going to be talking about evaluating information that we find online. And then we'll move on to talking specifically about deconstructing media messages. And then finally, we're going to talk about social media and some of the key information literacy issues we run into there. I thought it was really important to have this digital media literacy presentation after our social media September, because we have just gone over how to consume all these forms of information and media, and we have to know now how to evaluate those kinds of information we are coming into contact with to assess it for validity. So up first, let's talk about evaluating information. And I just have a really short video where I'm going to play for you all. And the link to this will be in our follow-up email that I'll send on Thursday. So let's take a listen.
With so much information online, it can be tough to know what's factual and what's inaccurate or sensationalized. That's why you should always evaluate what you find online to confirm its reliability. First, determine if the website you're visiting is reliable. Trustworthy websites offer objective fact based on thorough research, but there are many other sites willing to share less reliable information. Always find out where an article or video got their information to ensure they're sticking to the truth. If an article makes a claim without mentioning the source of that claim, be skeptical. Next, always keep an eye out for bias, as a biased website may distort the truth in order to influence you. They may use emotional language, make broad generalizations and assumptions, or leave out key facts. To overcome bias, focus on the facts of an article, and then check multiple websites covering the same topic. While this process may seem time-consuming, getting different perspectives can shed new light on a subject, while helping you look beyond possible bias. In addition to external bias, you also need to watch out for your own. Confirmation bias is the tendency to seek out and favor information that reinforces your existing beliefs, and it can make it harder to look at a site objectively. To get over confirmation bias, ask questions to try and understand different viewpoints, and investigate the accuracy of all the information you consume, whether you agree with it or not. Comedy writing is all over the internet, so it's possible that an outlandish article could actually be a joke. Some sites, like The Onion, write humorous content based on current events, and at first glance, their stories can look authentic. However, if a story seems a little too wild, make sure it isn't trying to be funny. Finally, whenever you check multiple sources, also consider using fact-checking sites like PolitiFact, FactCheck, or Snopes. These sites specialize in researching current events and claims. Although these sites aren't perfect, they do provide reliable sources that you can investigate yourself. The internet is full of near limitless knowledge, but it's up to you to figure out what's reliable and what's not. Take your time when consuming information online, because truth is worth the effort.
All right, so I think that video gives us a really good overview on how to kind of go about looking at multiple sources, and it really defines what confirmation bias is for us. Another thing the video does really well is to say that even from sources you find to be reliable, you should still seek out other sources to confirm what they are stating as fact. So even when the library says something, you should still seek out another source to confirm those facts. And of course, we're going to talk about confirmation bias and seeking multiple sources more throughout this presentation. Let's talk specifically about evaluating a web page. Generally, there are a series of questions you want to ask yourself. The first one, of course, is the information even relevant? Does the information relate to your topic or answer your question? If I'm looking for a good website to learn about caring for my Hoya plant, I'm probably not going to find one that only talks about monsteras relevant. Next, you want to think about what the purpose of the site is. Specifically, even the purpose of the web page or article that you're looking at. There are generally 4 purposes for writing anything, and they are expositive, descriptive, narrative, and persuasive. So in exposition, we're explaining something about a fact or a theory without putting in any personal opinion. Once you put in a personal opinion into expositive writing, it's something different. And in descriptive writing, it's detail and visualization and has very precise details. Now, narrative can be almost anything. That's the nature of narrative writing. It's more story-based and can be real or unreal, and there can be facts that are real in the world created by the author, facts that aren't facts in real life. So narrative is its own thing. And then there's persuasive writing, where the pieces want to influence the reader to a certain point of view. And it's important to know from pretty much as soon as you look at something, what the writer's goal was in writing that piece. And we want to think if the site's biased, right? So if you go to a site that's Lydia Nimke for president, well, of course, it's going to have a lot of positive, awesome information about me and how qualified I am to be the president of whatever I'm running for president for. It's probably going to be biased to have good information about me and negative information about whoever's running against me. And then you want to think, is the author reliable? Can you find any information on the author that would put them into an authority position on the subject they're writing about? So I love to write. I have since I was a little girl, and I could probably make something up whole cloth and be quite persuasive about it. But there's going to be a difference between reading something written by me about virtual programs or technology training or library resources or a couple other things I have in my background, and reading an article about motorcycle repair, like The Best Way to Repair Your Motorcycle by Lydia Nimke. Because I don't know anything about mechanical repair. I don't have that in my background, and I'm not an authority on that. You can probably do a quick Google search and find some of my social media pages and websites I've built and my LinkedIn and see that I have a background in technology training and libraries, but I don't have any mechanical background whatsoever. So I wouldn't be a reliable source for motorcycle repair, but I'd probably be a reliable source for, a Zoom training class or a Zoom training article, something like that. And then we want to think, is the information we're looking at current? If we were to read an article written about COVID-19 from early 2020, from like February 2020, chances are it would be largely unreliable, as we have learned things and put different procedures in place than we thought were necessary then. I believe in 2020, there may have still been no recorded cases in the United States. So if someone was looking at that article today, they might think, oh, yeah, it's not in the United States. But of course, we all know that's not the case. And then finally, you want to think about the site's reputation, right? So sites like JS Online, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel's website, has a great reputation, where there's some sites or blogs that have been multiple times fact-checked and have multiple times been shown to misinform their readers. Whether they do that purposefully or as an accident, it's just important to know and think about in your mind, do you see that site as a reputable one that you can count on to be accurate? And everybody makes mistakes, right? If they're not accurate, do they go out of their way to draw readers' attention to the inaccuracy and publish a retraction or a correction and show the correction date alongside the original published date? Those are all things we can do when evaluating a web page. But putting all of that together, we can do the CRAP test. So I think it's a really fun and easy way to remember things. CRAAP. Each time we look at a website to make decisions or gain knowledge from the information therein, we're going to look for the currency. That's the timeliness of the information. We're going to look at the relevance, the importance of the information for our needs. We're going to look at the authority of the website to verify the source of the information and whether or not they're qualified to be speaking on the subject. And then we're going to look for accuracy. We want to see reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the content. And then finally, what's the purpose? Why does this information exist, and what are they trying to do with it? What purpose is it serving them? Now, if you don't know, the site's top level domain is actually a really good indicator on whether or not you can start thinking of a site as reliable. Um, so .gov is a government website, and they are usually reliable. .edu can be a school, college, or university, and some web pages could be student projects. So it's important to try to determine who the page was written by. Usually schools and colleges are better about this than some other organizations of showing you who created what specific content. There's usually going to be a directory that'll show you what subjects the author teaches, what their role is at the school, things of that nature that can help you determine if they are an authority. .org is an organization. So depending on the organization's mission, it could be biased or it could be unbiased. Try to find more information about the organization and its purpose before you make a determination about the website and its web content. So for example, it's really easy to find MPL's mission statement. You know, we help people read, learn, connect. And so a lot of the information you're going to find on our website, which is a .org, are driving those purposes, are, you know, in service of those purposes. So you'll see a lot of descriptive writing, you'll see a lot of expositive writing, people trying to explain different resources and explain the value of different things and describing different resources the library offers. But you won't see a whole lot of persuasive writing unless you're on a site that wants, or on a page that wants you to donate to the library, for example, then you might see some, but that's probably the only place you'll see persuasive writing. And you won't see a whole lot of narration because that's just not in line with our mission to tell stories. In very rare circumstances will you see narration. And that kind of speaks to what our mission is. So that's in line with that. Now, .coms are typically used by commercial sites intended to make money at the end of the day. So Facebook.com, Instagram.com, most of all the others. And this isn't, you know, really an indicator to tell you whether a site's reliable or not. That a .gov is an indicator that yes, it's probably more reliable than others. So it's important to check these sites before making any lasting judgments. Now for a note on Wikipedia. Is Wikipedia reliable? It really depends. It depends on who you ask, because you might get very different answers from different people. Some may say yes, it's a better source of information than most websites, and it's a good starting point for research. Others are like, no, anyone can add or change information, even if they don't know what they're talking about. And the truth is, it still just depends on how you use Wikipedia. It's a great starting point for research, but you should not assume that all of the information is true. Instead, you want to look at the references at the bottom of the article and find original sources. And then you'll need to evaluate these sources to see whether or not they are reliable. I use Wikipedia pretty regularly. When someone asks me a question at the library and wants me to find them resources on subjects I literally have no frame of reference for, my starting point is usually a Google search, and the first result is a Wikipedia article. And I read through the introduction of the Wikipedia article to understand, you know, some search terms to help me do a more in-depth search with the databases and catalog the library has. That's usually my first stop for something I don't understand. Someone just recently asked me about biotomes, and I barely knew how to spell that word. So I definitely did a Google search, stopped on Wikipedia, and was like, oh, it's like a mini environment that he wanted to create in his house. Okay, I got that. It's important to keep in mind, though, that some Wikipedia articles are better than others. And I have an example for you to compare to see a really good and fleshed out Wikipedia article versus one that is pretty bad and would not be reliable. So let's take a look at that. So here we are on Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. And as we can see, we have a good introduction, and we have links to other Wikipedia articles. That's great. And in our table of contents, we can see it's very thorough, going through the history, librarians, types of libraries, the organization, the shift to digital, all that good stuff. And then we're actually going to click on references, and this is just going to hop us to the bottom of this same page. You see, there are so many things that have been cited in the creation of this Wikipedia article, 93 different articles. A lot of them are hyperlinked, meaning they're available online, whether they're behind a paywall or not, it might be, it might not be. But the library can always help you find scholarly articles and things of that nature. So if you run into a paywall, come and talk to us and we'll be happy to help you bust through it. And then there are some things that aren't hyperlinked, just meaning that they might not be available online. They might be from a physical book or something like that. You can actually go ahead and click on the ones that are hyperlinked. And if it's available for free, you'll be able to read it and see how they drew those conclusions, which is great. Now, let's take a look at a bad Wikipedia article. So as you can see in the top of this, Wikipedia says this article has issues. So that gives you a little notice that this information might not be reliable. It doesn't cite any sources, and it could contain original research. So it's literally 3 lines with no references. So it could be reliable, but it's difficult to say with any certainty that it is or that it isn't. So better off using something you can identify as reliable than something you can't say one way or the other. Back into the presentation. So a lot of strength and knowledge of good digital media literacy comes from using multiple sources. So just like when you were writing papers in school, you want to make sure you don't get all of your information in one place, from one book or from one website or from one article. Maybe you look at the Wikipedia article to start with, and then from there you understand a little bit more. So you click on a couple of the citations or references to get more information. And then maybe by then you know enough to kind of craft your own search queries. And you go to Google Scholar or JSTOR or EBSCOhost and search for other scholarly articles on the subject. It's a very good practice to review more than one website or source before forming opinions and making decisions. Even with something as simple as buying a new TV, we could look at a NerdWallet article and see their list of the best TVs released in 2021, but that's just one source. We don't know if any of those TV companies paid NerdWallet to say that they were the best TV, or we don't know if the author has some sort of vendetta against a company that makes TVs and left them off the list. We simply can't know that information. So that's why we verify by using multiple sources. And in this example, maybe we want to bring in a Consumer Reports to see their listing of all TVs that were released in 2021 and how they rank against each other and for what specific purposes. Now we're going to take a look at some example web pages for us. But if you have any questions about the things we've covered so far, you can go ahead and put those in the Q&A. Otherwise, I will pull up these websites here. All right, I don't see anything as of yet. Wonderful. So here on this website, we're gonna run through the CRAP test, right? We're starting off by looking at the currency of information. So we see that this article is published in 2017, which seems pretty current for something that happened over 50 years ago. I think that's plenty current. We might not want an article from, I don't know how there would be an internet article from 1970, but we might not want something that's that old. I'd say it is current, relevant. So if our question was, how do we know the moon landing really happened? This is going to be super relevant to us. Now for authority. So the website is the National Space Center in the UK, and the author is Scott Davis. So we don't know anything about Scott Davis, but we know the National Space Center, right? The National Space Center is an authority in this field, and we can trust the things that they put on their website to be objective and to be true. And we don't know anything about Scott Davis. Sometimes the author's name will be hyperlinked and go to a profile, but this one doesn't. I happen to know from doing like some background research on Scott Davis that he's actually a NASA ambassador, so he is an authority on the subject as well. But you wouldn't necessarily gather that just by looking at this page. So authority, they're good on that front. Accuracy, so reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of the info. So let's scroll on down and look at the actual article. I, off cuff, don't see anything that I find to be wrong with this. But if you were to say, look at this first line, mankind first stepped on the moon on 20 July 1969, and for whatever reason, you know for a fact that, if it said 20th of June 1967, and you knew that was the incorrect date, that would be a mark against it. But this is all correct to me. Everything I've read, skimming through this article has been correct. So it passes on my accuracy test. And then purpose. Why does this exist? And we find the purpose right here. They're looking into some of the common questions around the moon landings and address some of the more curious lunar phenomenon with the latest data and scientific understanding. So that's a clue to me that it's going to be expositive. It's going to be a lot of them explaining the different phenomena that, people thought were reasons why the moon landing was faked. So that's a good example, an example of a good website, a good example of a good website. Let's look at a not so great example. And I just made this a little bigger so you could all see, but this is what it looks like without zooming in or anything. And we're going to run through that same exact crap test. So currency. So I don't see a date on this page. I see this small date up here, but that's actually just today's date. And every time I've gone through this presentation in the last couple days, it's always been today's date. So that's not the date. I can't find any other date. I've scrolled up and down this entire page and I can't find any other published date. So I have no idea if it's current. I have no idea when this was made. So it loses on our currency check. That's one mark against it. Relevant. Is the information suited for our needs? So if I searched, how do we know that man really landed on the moon? And I found this article, it looks relevant to our needs. So it meets the relevance check. And then for the authority, I don't know who wrote this. I don't know what the site, mrbashir.tripod.com. I've never heard of them before. I don't think they're relevant. Just from that thought. So I cannot say for a fact that they're a source of authority on information related to the moon landings. So I'm going to say that's another mark against it. So that's 2 out of 3 marks against. Now, accuracy. We want reliability, truthfulness, and correctness of info. So they start off their article by asking a bunch of questions, which is fine. But if you look a little closer, you're going to notice a lot of grammatical errors. Was NASA fooled the whole world on 20th July 1969 as one of the most historical events of the second millennium? Period, question mark. That, you know, grammar is not necessarily an indicator of reliability. There are ESL learners out there who, write things on the internet, of course. However, presumably, this person has researched this subject and would be able to speak eloquently on it in the language they decided to publish it in, presumably. So that doesn't feel great to me, to be trusting a website full of grammatical errors. So I'm going to give it it could be accurate. I personally, as soon as I see a grammatical error in something that's supposed to be fact-based, especially something as obvious as this, I would not call it as accurate, but you have to judge each case according to a wide variety of things. The last thing we want to check out is the purpose. And whoever the author is, because we still don't know, right? They give us a little bit of information on their purpose. They want to call attention to this issue. There are many sites related to this conspiracy theories, both for and against. This page comprises a few cut and paste from these sites with links to them. Look at their evidence rationally and critically before you make up their mind. So they use some buzzwords to try and frame this article as if it was exposition or description. But I would argue that it's persuasion, because every single one of these points that it makes in its introduction, this is the only thing that should be originally written by whoever wrote this article, according to what they just said at the end here. All of these points are to kind of the it was a hoax side, which is a very one-sided argument. And then if you scroll on further down the page, you'll see that all of the resources they're linking to are all showing that it's a hoax. So it's not presenting you with both sides objectively, as it kind of said it was going to in this introduction here. Whereas in the good example, they present they'll present what the conspiracy theorists say. Wouldn't the Van Allen belts have fried the astronauts? And then provide objective argument and fact as to why that is not the case. So quite a difference there. I would argue that this is trying to be persuasive with a disguise of exposition. So this loses for me. I wouldn't say this website is reliable at all. But this is just an example. It won't be as obvious as this is usually, so keep an eye out, because it probably won't be as obvious as this with the star background and the random menu items up at the top. Now I see we have a question from Regina Williams. And they ask, when you find unreliable information from a 90% accurate source, can you just not use that paragraph and be okay? I'd say you can. If you're using it in like your own personal writing, if you wanna if you found a perfect article that details the life cycle of a Hoya plant, for example, but there's a paragraph in there that actually says, wrong care information. You can still use the life cycle information if that information has been verified. Just don't use the care information about the Hoya plant that the article details. Everybody makes mistakes, as we know. I'm sure whoever published that regrets the mistake they made. Thank you for your question. If there are any more, feel free to put those in the Q&A. All right, hopping back into the presentation here. I want to talk about 3 more things to do with evaluating web pages and online content. The first one is sponsored content. Sponsored content has become really widespread, from BuzzFeed and HuffPo to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. It's very prevalent on social media. We saw a lot of this last month. The concern is that sponsored content is so effective at blending in with its surroundings that many people can't tell the difference between sponsored material and genuinely objective content. So what you can do with that to kind of make sure you're keying in on those main areas is check the byline of an article or a post or the description of a video and look for any language that suggests the content has been paid for. Sites based in the United States, at least, are required to add a notice if the content has been paid for by an outside company. However, it may be worded in like a strange way. For example, paid post, content from, sponsored, brand publisher. But whenever you see phrases kind of in this arena, it should be an indicator to you that the person posting this got paid to do it. Not to say that it's not their true opinion, not to say that it isn't a great product that they're promoting, but it's their job to do it. So of course they've done it. Clickbait. Clickbait is a sensationalized headline that encourages you to click a link to an article, image, or video, and instead of presenting objective facts, clickbait headlines often appeal to your emotions and curiosity. Once you click, the website hosting the link gets revenue from their advertisers, but the actual content is usually of super questionable quality and accuracy. Websites use clickbait to draw in as many clicks as possible to increase their ad revenue. You might wonder why these clickbait headlines spread so much, and despite the poor quality and accuracy, but unfortunately, studies have shown that about 6 out of 10 people share headlines on social media without reading the actual article. So they spread pretty much like wildfire if the clickbaity title is good enough. You can usually spot clickbait through an outrageous headline or image, but it's not always that easy. Sometimes it's difficult to spot the difference. There are a few common elements used in clickbait content, such as vague headlines and images that let your imaginations run wild. Shock and outrage. That's a big one. Like 17 facts you won't believe are true. Using numbered lists is a big hint that it might be clickbait. And a lot of lists or a lot of links use the combination of these to lure you into clicking. If the headline tells you how to feel instead of letting you come up with your own reaction, it's probably clickbait. And you can see that in some of the examples I have here. So, for example, looking at Vanessa Williams' surprising DNA test, it's telling us we need to be surprised. So, if you're a Vanessa Williams fan and you see that and you're like, what's surprising about her DNA test? I have to check this out. Boom, you click it, you go in there, you just see a bunch of ads and maybe a paragraph of actual information about her so-called surprising DNA test. And then you're kind of like, oh, and then most likely you'll see some other interesting and sensationalized things all around that post that want you to keep clicking. This one down here shows that there are 7 foods that are terrible for your health. Number 4 will blow your mind. Okay. That's a listed number, but also quite vague. Terrible for your health, how? Ooh, we do not know. And then this one that has the red is probably the funniest one. We just see a picture of a person next to another person in an elevator. They thought they were alone, but the deputy didn't know a camera was filming. Super vague. So she did what? She stood there politely, she did a dance. They both high-fived each other and jumped into a convertible afterwards. Like, it's so vague, and it's probably not anything that's actually going to be reliable behind that link. The other thing is targeted advertising. It's important to recognize that you and another person could be on 2 devices going to the exact same website but see different ads and links to articles in the sidebar. And this is largely the result of targeted advertising. Here's one of the most common methods, and I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you go to Amazon to look for a new Paul McCartney CD. In order to keep track of your visit, so you can pick up where you left off whenever you want, Amazon creates a file called a cookie and puts it on your computer. Later, when you're reading an article on Slate or on the New York Times, automated advertisements read this cookie and generate ads for items related to your Amazon visit, like other Paul McCartney albums or a Beatles t-shirt. Aside from cookies, advertisers also learn about you in other ways, like looking at things you've searched on their website, finding your personal information that you've inputted onto their site. Targeting advertising could be seen as an invasion of privacy, but everything you put on the internet can be tracked, whether it's search engine requests or social media updates or the websites you visit. And if it can be tracked, the information may return to you in the form of a targeted ad. So we're going to move on to talking about media specifically. And I might start talking really fast because I'm running out of time. So we also have to deconstruct our media messages, just like how we evaluate our web pages. So we start by knowing who is responsible for the message, who's the source of the message. We want to do this with news. We want to do this with social media. We want to do this across the board. We want to do this with television shows, documentaries, the whole gambit. If the source isn't obvious and you can't assess their potential for bias, you can try and find the source through following links or checking legal disclaimers. But sometimes if you just can't find it, you just can't find it. And that's a tick against that source for me. You also want to think about how the message is trying to get your attention. All right, it's using a lot of text, probably, but it also uses language, imagery, music, anything that you can see and hear. They want to use a lot of techniques to try and grab your attention and craft it to appeal to a specific audience. Even if you enjoy the message, say they use a really catchy song or a song that you love, remain critical so you can see if it contains actual substance or if it's all smoke and mirrors. How could this message be interpreted? We want to ask that question because the implied part of a message is called the subtext, and it's suggested rather than directly seen or heard. And we decide how to interpret it based on our personal biases, views, and expectations. People with different perspectives might interpret the same piece of media very differently. We also want to consider if the message is fair and trustworthy. Some media may withhold or exaggerate information, like an ad that makes their product appear more effective than it really is. Make sure you have a complete set of information from trustworthy sources, even if the media itself neglects to give it to you. A big part of deconstructing media messages is recognizing persuasive language, right? So even if they present the message they're selling you as just descriptive, you can recognize if you can recognize that persuasive language, you're going to have a powerful tool, because using persuasive language is the media's most powerful tool in getting you to usually buy things. Sell you on something. They want to sell you on something without you realizing you've necessarily been sold. So if you can recognize the different ways they attempt to persuade you that you need new windows for your house or that you must buy a new car, you're going to be able to deconstruct those media messages with ease. So the first way I'm going to talk about is telling stories. And whether that's a feature-length film or a 30-second commercial, telling stories through media makes it easier for you to agree with a particular message. I tell you all stories in all my Tech Tuesdays, but I tell them with the goal of education in mind, of giving you a different example from my lived experience that you might be able to apply to your own life. Other people tell stories with a little bit different of an intent sometimes, and it's easy to be charmed by a good story. So ask yourself, is the tale fair and unbiased, or has it sacrificed factual accuracy for the sake of serving the message? Another persuasive message is presenting evidence. So, like the Man on the Moon, um, a rethink website we were just looking at, in order to persuade us that man did not land on the moon, they presented all this evidence to us about all the different ways that it was false and that they were just filming in a desert in Nevada. Even though they stated their purpose as not being persuasive, we could clearly say that it actually was. Presenting evidence can have a tremendous influence on how you perceive a message. Take care to examine all evidence before accepting a message as trustworthy. Now, attacks. Attacks point out faults in the competition, and they often provoke an audience's fears or anger, especially in political media. I know we've seen a lot of this lately. Um, I won't give you any examples. I'm sure you have many that come to mind. Keep in mind that it's trying to rile your emotions to convince you of a specific idea. You may also It may also embellish facts or take a skewed perspective. So try not to pass judgment before investigating the truth. Now, flattery has long been a reliable persuasion method. I think little kids know how to use this one. They say, "Oh, Miss Teacher, you're so pretty. Can I actually take this toy from Jimmy because I want it and he doesn't need it?" You know? Um, but thing to ask yourself when you recognize flattery in media is how sincere it could possibly be because it's mass produced. Do your best to not be lured in by kind words and consider if the media is just telling you what you want to hear. and then using inclusive language. Another one we've seen a lot of late. Inclusive language frames a message in terms of us and we and our, giving the impression that the creator of the media and the audience are on the same side. However, this can obviously come off as false and hollow, especially if it appears the creator doesn't actually have anything in common with you. Again, not going to give you any examples. I'm sure you have some that come to mind. This inclusive language thing has become super politically charged. So whether it's used to reinforce the truth or hide a lack of substance, don't let persuasive language be the only thing that sways your opinion. Always look beyond that first level of rhetoric and seek out the facts behind any claims that are being made. I might actually skip this slide just to make sure I finish the presentation on time. But it's important to note that opinions aren't inherently bad, is the main point I wanted to make here. They can provide new context and a different perspective. They aren't inherently bad, but you just have to be able to identify them, which we seem to have lost our ability to do. And media outlets don't make it very apparent what is fact or opinion in ways that they used to by using phrases like editorial or op-ed or opinion piece. It's not quite as common as it once was to see those phrases that symbolize to you, oh, this is an opinion. I can take it for an opinion. So a Pew Research study created 5 factual statements and 5 opinion statements. And out of 5,000 adults, they found that only 35% correctly identified all 5 opinion statements, and only 26 identified all 5 factual statements. That means the vast majority either saw facts as opinions or accepted opinions as facts. And misinterpretations like these could easily lead to confusion and difficulty in discussing current events with others. I am scooching along too fast there. The blur between fact and opinion is probably not going to get any better because the internet has pushed everything together and stretched it apart, and it's hard to spot the difference. But you can watch out for statements that might seem factual but are actually opinions that favor a certain perspective. And while you may find terms like editorial every now and then, don't rely on them to help you distinguish fact from opinion. I could say, it's a fact that the library is the best place to work at. It's not a fact at all. That's my opinion. But just me putting it's a fact before it can sometimes kind of confuse people. And we're just going to briefly touch on social media to kind of wrap up our social media September. And we find very particular phenomena when we are on social media, especially when it comes to information literacy. The first one is an echo chamber, and I'm sure some of you have heard about this before. It's an environment where a person only encounters information or opinions that reflect and reinforce their own. They're fueled in part by confirmation bias, which again is that tendency to favor information that reinforces existing beliefs. Echo chambers can happen anywhere that information is exchanged, whether it's online or in real life. But on the internet, almost anyone can quickly find like-minded people and perspectives via social media, Reddit, news sources. This has made echo chambers far more numerous and easy to fall into. So how do you recognize and avoid echo chambers? Because I would think, well, maybe I'm assuming, but I would think we all want to, have as full of a view on subjects that are of interest and important to us as possible. So how do we take a note if we are in an echo chamber? Well, do they only give one perspective on an issue? Is the viewpoint mainly supported by rumor or incomplete evidence? Are facts ignored whenever they go against their viewpoint? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you might have found an echo chamber. There's no perfect way to avoid them, but you can help kind of stay on the right track by making a habit of checking multiple news sources to ensure you're getting as complete of a picture as possible. You can interact with people of different perspectives and ask them, how they feel about a certain thing, and take care to discuss new ideas with facts, patience, and respect. And remember, just because you want something to be true doesn't make it fact. I want libraries to be the best place to work at, but that's not necessarily a fact. And the internet has a really unique type of echo chamber called a filter bubble. And these are actually created by the algorithms that keep track of what you click on. Websites use those algorithms to show you content that's similar to what you've already expressed interest in, which can prevent you from finding new ideas and perspectives. So just like we talked about on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, they show you things that they already know you're interested in, so you stay on their platform longer. Being in a filter bubble means that these algorithms have isolated you from information and perspectives that you aren't already interested in, meaning you could miss out on important information. For example, a social media site could hide posts from friends that with different viewpoints, or a news site might display articles it thinks you'll agree with. You might not even realize you're in a filter bubble. And everyone who uses social media and the internet is in one, because the algorithms, they don't ask for your permission, they don't tell you when they're active, or say what they're keeping from you. They've become such an ingrained part of the internet as a whole. If you want to go online, avoiding them is pretty much impossible. And then once everyone gets stuck in their own bubble, the problem only gets worse. People can't make educated judgments, they can't have educated conversations, and it becomes difficult to have a meaningful discussion about facts. So filter bubbles really contribute to a lack of understanding and an unwillingness to consider opposing viewpoints and unfavorable information. But what you can do is the same as with echo chambers, is make a point to check multiple news sources, totally different ones, and also make it a point to have real conversations with real people who might have different perspectives than you, with respect, of course. Other than that, there's really no definitive solution. Just keep them in mind and continually try to seek out new sources and perspectives. And hopefully, by doing so, you'll be able to take back some control in your online experience and have fun on the internet and recognize what sort of information you're looking at. And I made it just in time. Are there any lingering questions about today's presentation? I see we have one here. Kitty says, I have come to accept antivirus software costs as a necessary part of my utilities in my household budget. Yeah, yeah, that is definitely um, something we have to do. Absolutely, because we honestly never know what we're getting into, and I am glad that you're protected. All right. Are there any more questions we have? I don't see any. On the screen right now is my email address. You can feel free to contact me if you do have any more questions. Next week, we are going to take a look at Google account and Google Chrome as part of our Google Tools sub-series. I'd like to thank you all for joining me today. I hope some of you will join us next week for Tech Tuesdays. You will receive a follow-up email from me on Thursday, so look out for that. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out. lcnimp@milwaukee.gov. And if you're interested in any other offerings from the library, I encourage you to visit mpl.org/calendar and see what other fun events we have going on there. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Bye.